Crash landing. The vast emptiness of space shimmered with countless stars, a deceptively peaceful backdrop to the frantic flight of a sleek silver spacecraft. Inside the cockpit, Princess Lyra of the Astari people gripped the controls with trembling hands, her violet eyes wide with fear and determination. Alarms blared around her, red warning lights flashing across the ship's consoles. "Computer, status report," Lyra shouted, her voice cracking with exhaustion. "Multiple systems failing. Hull integrity at 37%. Fuel reserves critically low. Recommend immediate landing on nearest habitable planet," the AI responded in its emotionless tone. Lyra's heart raced as she scanned the nearby star systems. Her home world of Australia was light years behind her, consumed by a brutal civil war that had toppled her family's reign. She was the last of the royal line, carrying with her the hopes of her loyalists and the key to restoring peace to her people. A small blue-green planet appeared on her view screen. "Computer, analyze that world," Lyra commanded. "Planet designation: Earth. Atmosphere breathable. Indigenous population. Pre-interstellar. Warning: landing protocols compromised. Crash imminent." Lyra steeled herself. It wasn't an ideal situation, but she had no choice. "Initiate emergency landing sequence," she ordered, bracing for impact. The ship plummeted through Earth's atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot from the friction. Lyra fought to maintain control, but the damaged systems made it nearly impossible. Trees rushed up to meet her as the craft plunged into a dense forest, carving a destructive path through the wilderness before coming to a violent stop. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the distant calls of startled wildlife. Inside the wreckage, Lyra lay unconscious, her delicate features marred by cuts and bruises. The ship's emergency beacon flickered weakly, its signal barely penetrating the thick canopy above. Miles away, in a small clearing, a scruffy mutt raised his head, ears twitching. The dog, a mixed breed with intelligent eyes and a shaggy coat, had been abandoned in these woods months ago. He'd learned to survive on his own, but a part of him still longed for companionship. Something in the air felt different. A faint scent, unlike anything he'd encountered before, tickled his sensitive nose. Curiosity overrode caution, and the dog set off into the forest, following the strange smell. As dawn broke, casting dappled sunlight through the leaves, the dog approached the crash site. Smoke still rose from the twisted metal of Lyra's ship, and debris was scattered across the forest floor. The dog sniffed cautiously, circling the wreckage until he found an opening. Inside, he discovered Lyra's unconscious form. The dog whined softly, nudging her hand with his wet nose. When she didn't respond, he curled up beside her, offering warmth and protection as he'd once done for his human family. Hours passed. The forest slowly came alive with the sounds of birds and small animals, seemingly undisturbed by the alien object in their midst. Inside the ship, Lyra stirred, consciousness returning in a haze of pain and confusion. She blinked, trying to focus on her surroundings. The first thing she saw was a pair of warm, brown eyes staring at her with concern. Lyra gasped, instinctively recoiling before realizing the creature beside her posed no immediate threat. What are you?" she whispered, her translator struggling to find the right words in this world's languages. The dog tilted his head, tail wagging slightly at the sound of her voice. He let out a soft woof in response. Lyra's scientific training kicked in, helping her push aside her fear and analyze the situation. The creature appeared to be some kind of native fauna, possibly domesticated given its non-aggressive behavior. Its presence was oddly comforting in the aftermath of her crash. Slowly, carefully, she reached out a hand. The dog sniffed it, then gave her fingers a gentle lick. A small smile crossed Lyra's face, her first since fleeing her homeworld. "Thank you for staying with me, little one," she said softly. "I suppose we're both a bit lost, aren't we?" With the dog's help, Lyra managed to extricate herself from the wreckage. Each movement sent spikes of pain through her body, but her Astari physiology was already working to heal the worst of her injuries. She stumbled out into the forest, leaning against a tree as she took in her new surroundings. The lush greenery was unlike anything on her arid homeworld. The air was thick with moisture and the sense of unfamiliar plants. Laura's scientific curiosity warred with a sense of caution. She was stranded on an alien world with unknown dangers. The dog stayed close, seeming to sense her unease. His presence was reassuring, a reminder that she wasn't entirely alone. Laura knelt down, wincing at the movement, and gently stroked the dog's fur. "I don't suppose you know where I might find help?" she asked, not expecting an answer. To her surprise, the dog barked once and began trotting away. After a few steps, he looked back at her expectantly. Laura hesitated, glancing back at her ruined ship. There was nothing salvageable in the short term, and staying put wasn't an option. With a deep breath, she made her decision. "Very well, my furry guide. Lead on." As they made their way through the forest, Lara's mind raced with plans and contingencies. Her top priority was to find a way to contact her allies without alerting her enemies to her location. But first, she needed to understand this world and its inhabitants. The dog led her to a small stream, and Lyra realized how parched she was. She cupped her hands, drinking the cool water gratefully. As she did so, she caught sight of her reflection and gasped. Her usually sleek, silver hair was matted with dirt and blood. The regal attire she'd worn during her escape was torn and burned. "I'm a far cry from a princess now," she murmured. The dog nudged her hand, as if offering comfort. Lyra managed a small smile. "You're right. Titles mean little here. We focus on survival first." As the day wore on, Lyra and her canine companion traversed the forest. The dog seemed to have a destination in mind, though Lyra couldn't fathom what it might be. Her body ached, and the alien environment taxed her senses, but she pressed on. Periodically, they would stop to rest. During these breaks, Lyra attempted to use her limited equipment to scan for signs of civilization. The results were inconclusive. There were faint energy signatures that might indicate technology, but nothing definitive. As evening approached, bringing with it a chorus of unfamiliar animal sounds, Lyra's concern grew. She needed shelter for the night, and her knowledge of Earth's potential predators was non-existent. The dog, however, seemed unconcerned. Just as Lyra was about to suggest they find a defensible position for the night, the trees thinned, revealing a startling sight. A small wooden structure stood in a clearing, clearly artificial, but long abandoned. "Is this what you were leading me to?" Lyra asked the dog, who wagged his tail in response. Cautiously, they approached the building. It appeared to be some kind of recreational shelter, with a collapsed table inside and the remnants of a fire pit nearby. While primitive, it offered more protection than the open forest. Lyra set about making the shelter as secure as possible, using broken branches to cover the windows and gathering dry leaves for bedding. The dog watched her work, occasionally bringing her sticks in an attempt to help. As night fell, Lyra huddled in the shelter with her canine protector. She stroked his fur absently, finding comfort in his steady presence. "I don't even know what to call you," she mused. After a moment's thought, she smiled. "How about Stella? It seems fitting for a guide among the stars." The newly named Stella wagged his tail, seeming to approve. Lyra's mind turned to the challenges ahead. She was stranded on a pre-interstellar world, hunted by her own people, with only a local animal as an ally. And yet, a spark of hope remained. If this world's inhabitants were advanced enough to build shelters like this, perhaps they were closer to the stars than she'd initially thought. As she drifted into an uneasy sleep, Lyra made a silent vow. She would find a way to contact her allies, to save her people from the tyranny that had overthrown her family. And somehow, she would find a way to protect this beautiful, primitive world from the conflict that pursued her across the stars. Stella shifted closer, his warm body a reassuring presence in the alien night. Together, the unlikely pair, an exiled alien princess and a stray Earth dog, faced an uncertain future on a world that held both danger and hope. The adventure was only beginning. Unlikely alliance. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the cracks in the makeshift shelter, rousing Princess Lyra from her fitful sleep. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, the unfamiliar scents and sounds of Earth's forest a stark reminder of her predicament. A warm weight against her side drew her attention, and she looked down to see Stella, the dog who had become her unexpected companion, still curled up beside her. "At least one of us slept well," Lyra murmured, a hint of fondness in her voice. She gently stroked Stella's fur, marveling at how quickly she'd come to rely on his presence. As if sensing her gaze, Stella's eyes fluttered open. He stretched, tail wagging, as he greeted the new day with enviable enthusiasm. Lyra couldn't help but smile, despite the gravity of her situation. "Come on, boy," she said, rising stiffly. "We've got a lot of ground to cover." Their first priority was finding food and water. Lyra's scientific training had included xenobiology, but theory and practice were vastly different. She eyed the various plants around them warily, unsure which might be safe for consumption. Stella, however, seemed to have no such reservations. He trotted confidently through the underbrush, occasionally stopping to sniff at something interesting. Lyra followed, her curiosity piqued. "You seem to know your way around," she observed. "I don't suppose you could show me what's safe to eat." To her surprise, Stella barked once and moved purposefully towards a nearby bush. He gently took a berry in his mouth, then dropped it at Lyra's feet, looking up at her expectantly. Lyra hesitated, then picked up the berry. She ran it through her portable scanner, relieved to find it contained no toxins her Astari physiology couldn't handle. "Well done, Stella," she praised, popping the berry into her mouth. The burst of sweetness was a welcome relief after hours without food. Over the next few hours, Stella led Lyra to various edible plants and fruits. She marveled at his intuition, wondering if all Earth dogs possessed such knowledge or if Stella was exceptional. Either way, she was grateful for his guidance. As midday approached, the heat began to take its toll. Lyra's homeworld was significantly cooler, and she found herself struggling with Earth's humidity. Stella seemed to sense her discomfort, leading her to a small, clear stream. Lyra knelt by the water, splashing her face and drinking deeply. She caught sight of her reflection and barely recognized herself. Her once regal appearance was now disheveled, her silver hair tangled with leaves and dirt, but there was a new strength in her eyes, a determination born of survival. "Look at us, Stella," she said, glancing at the dog as he lapped at the stream beside her. "A princess and a stray, trying to make sense of this world together." Stella looked up at her, water dripping from his muzzle, and gave a soft woof as if in agreement. As they rested by the stream, Lyra's thoughts turned to her next moves. She needed to find a way to contact her allies without alerting her enemies. But more pressingly, she needed to understand this world and its inhabitants. "What do you think, Stella?" she mused aloud. "Should we try to find the beings who built that shelter? Or should we focus on repairing my ship's communication systems?" Stella tilted his head, clearly not understanding but attentive nonetheless. Lyra smiled, reaching out to scratch behind his ears. "You're right, one step at a time. First, we need to secure our survival. Then we can worry about interstellar politics." Their respite was interrupted by a distant rumble. Lyra tensed, unfamiliar with Earth's weather patterns. "Is that normal?" she asked Stella, who had also perked up at the sound. The dog's sudden unease answered her question. Dark clouds were gathering overhead, and the forest had grown eerily quiet. Stella whined softly, nudging Lyra's hand. "We need to find shelter," Lyra realized. "Lead the way, boy." They set off at a brisk pace, Stella guiding them through the increasingly dense foliage. The wind picked up, whipping through the trees and sending leaves swirling around them. Lyra's heart raced, her alien physiology ill-equipped for Earth's sudden meteorological shifts. Just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall, Stella barked excitedly. Ahead, barely visible through the gloom, was the mouth of a small cave. They ducked inside just as the sky opened up, unleashing a torrent of rain. "Good boy, Stella," Lyra praised, catching her breath. "You're quite the survivor, aren't you?" As they settled into the cave, watching the storm rage outside, Lyra found herself reflecting on the strange turns her life had taken. A week ago, she had been a princess, surrounded by the advanced technology of her people. Now, she was huddled in a cave on an alien world, relying on a native animal for survival. And yet, there was something oddly freeing about it all. Here, stripped of her titles and responsibilities, she was just Lyra, a being trying to survive, no different from Stella or the creatures of this forest. As the day wore on and the storm showed no signs of abating, Lyra began to explore their temporary shelter. The cave was deeper than she'd initially thought, extending back into darkness. Curiosity piqued, she activated the light on her portable scanner. "Stay close, Stella," she murmured as they ventured deeper. The beam of light revealed crude markings on the cave walls, primitive art depicting stick figures and animals. Lyra's excitement grew. This was evidence of Earth's indigenous intelligent life. "Look at this, Stella," she said, running her hand over the ancient paintings. "Your people, humans, I assume, left their mark here long ago. Fascinating." As she studied the images, Lyra's scientific mind went into overdrive. The art suggested a species capable of abstract thought, of recording their experiences for future generations. It was a far cry from the advanced civilization she'd need to contact her allies, but it was a start. Their exploration was cut short by a hair-raising howl from outside the cave. Stella's hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Lyra froze, her alien ears straining to identify the source of the sound. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, one hand resting reassuringly on Stella's back. The howl came again, closer this time. Through the curtain of rain, Lyra caught a glimpse of movement, sleek, predatory forms prowling at the edge of the forest. "Wolves," she breathed, recognizing the animals from her studies of Earth's fauna. Not exactly the locals I was hoping to meet. Stella positioned himself between Lyra and the cave entrance, his protective instincts in full force. Lyra felt a surge of affection for her loyal companion, even as fear threatened to overwhelm her. "It's okay," she soothed, as much for herself as for Stella. "We're safe in here. They can't reach us." As if to challenge her words, one of the wolves appeared at the cave mouth, its eyes gleaming in the dim light. Stella's growl deepened, and Lyra's hand instinctively went to the small energy weapon at her hip, a last resort she'd hoped never to use. For a tense moment, predator and prey locked eyes. Then, to Lyra's amazement, the wolf turned away, retreating into the storm with its pack. "Did you see that, Stella?" Lyra exclaimed, her voice hushed with awe. "They respected your claim on this territory. Your species must have a complex relationship with theirs." As the adrenaline of the moment faded, exhaustion set in. Lyra slumped against the cave wall, sliding down to sit on the cool stone floor. Stella padded over, resting his head on her lap. "What a day," Lyra murmured, absently stroking Stella's fur. "You know, on my world, we have AIs and robots to help us with everything. But here I'm learning more about survival and adaptation than I ever did in the Royal Academies." She looked down at Stella, a smile playing on her lips. "And I've gained a far better companion than any robot. Thank you, my friend." As night fell and the storm gradually subsided, Lyra and Stella huddled together in the cave, each drawing comfort from the other's presence. The princess from the stars and the dog from Earth, an unlikely alliance forged in the crucible of survival. Before drifting off to sleep, Lyra's thoughts turned once more to her mission, to the conflict that had driven her to this wild, beautiful world. But now, those concerns seemed distant, overshadowed by more immediate challenges. Tomorrow, she whispered to Stella, we'll start looking for your people. Humans. They're our best hope for getting off this planet and saving my world. She paused, then added softly, but a part of me almost wishes we could stay here, just like this. Stella's only response was a contented sigh as he snuggled closer. As Lyra closed her eyes, she realized that in this dog, this loyal, brave Earth creature, she had found not just an ally, but a true friend. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The adventure continued, with each day bringing new discoveries, new dangers, and a deepening bond between two beings from worlds apart. First contact. The dawn broke clear and bright, a stark contrast to the previous day's tempest. Lyra stirred, her body stiff from sleeping on the cave floor. Stella was already awake, his tail thumping against the ground as he watched her. Ready to face a new day, boy? Lyra asked, stretching. Her translator implant buzzed slightly, still working to refine its understanding of Earth languages from the limited data it had gathered. They ventured out of the cave, the forest around them glistening with leftover raindrops. Lyra took a deep breath, savoring the crisp, clean air. It's beautiful, she murmured, so different from the climate-controlled environments of my world. Stella barked in agreement, then suddenly froze, his ears perking up. Lyra tensed, following his gaze. What is it? More wolves. But the dog's body language wasn't fearful. He seemed excited, even hopeful. Before Lyra could react, Stella took off running through the underbrush. Stella, wait. Lyra called, chasing after him. Her heart raced, not just from the exertion, but from the realization of what Stella might have sensed. Could it be humans? They burst through a thicket into a small clearing, and Lyra's breath caught in her throat. There, setting up what appeared to be some kind of campsite, were 3 humans, 2 male, 1 female, all looking as startled by the sudden intrusion as Lyra felt. For a moment, everyone stood frozen. Lyra's mind raced, all her diplomatic training seemingly forgotten in the face of this momentous encounter. Stella, however, had no such hesitation. He bounded towards the humans, tail wagging furiously. Whoa there, buddy. One of the men exclaimed, kneeling to greet Stella. Where did you come from? Lyra's translator buzzed as it processed the words, providing her with a rough understanding. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Hello, she said carefully, her translator converting her words into English. I apologize for our abrupt arrival. My name is Lyra, and this is Stella. The humans exchanged glances, clearly taken aback by her appearance and manner of speech. Hi there, the woman said, recovering first. I'm Dr. Elena Reyes. These are my colleagues, Dr. Tom Chen and Jack Hawkins. Are you lost? Lyra hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. These humans seemed friendly, but caution was still necessary. In a manner of speaking, yes. Stella and I have been traveling, and we found ourselves in unfamiliar territory. Dr. Chen stepped forward, his brow furrowed in concern. Are you all right? You look like you've been through quite an ordeal. Lyra glanced down at herself, suddenly acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. We've had some challenges, she admitted, but Stella has been an invaluable guide and protector. As if on cue, Stella trotted back to Lyra's side, sitting proudly next to her. The sight seemed to ease some of the humans' tension. Well, you're welcome to join us, Jack offered. We're on a research expedition, studying the local ecosystem. We have plenty of supplies, and it looks like you could use a good meal and some rest. Lyra felt a wave of relief wash over her. Thank you. Your kindness is most appreciated. As they settled around the campfire, Lyra carefully observed the humans, fascinated by their interactions. They were clearly a scientific team, their conversation peppered with technical terms that her translator struggled to convey accurately. So, Lyra, Elena said as she handed her a plate of food, where are you from? Your accent is unusual. Lyra paused, considering her response. I'm from very far away. A place quite different from here. Abroad, huh? Jack nodded. Must be quite the culture shock, ending up in the middle of nowhere like this. You have no idea, Lyra murmured, causing Stella to look up at her knowingly. As the conversation flowed, Lyra found herself relaxing. These humans were curious and intelligent, reminding her of her own people's scientists. She asked questions about their research, their technology, and their understanding of the world, carefully framing her inquiries to avoid suspicion. You seem very interested in our work, Tom observed. Are you a scientist yourself? Lyra smiled. I have a diverse education. Your methods are fascinating to me. As night fell, the group retired to their tents, with Elena insisting that Lyra take the spare. Alone for the first time since meeting the humans, Lyra allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Oh, Stella, she whispered, hugging the dog close. What are we going to do? They're kind, but how can I explain who I really am? What I need? Stella licked her face comfortingly, and Lyra managed a small smile. You're right, one step at a time. Tomorrow we'll learn more. The next morning brought new challenges. As the group packed up their camp, Lyra's advanced knowledge slipped out more than once, raising eyebrows among the scientists. Lyra, Elena said carefully as they hiked through the forest, I hope you don't mind me asking, but who are you, really? Your understanding of quantum mechanics is way beyond what I'd expect from someone who just happened to be lost in the woods. Lyra felt a moment of panic, but looking at Stella's encouraging gaze, she made a decision. These humans had shown her kindness and trust. Perhaps it was time to return that trust. Dr. Reyes, Elena, she began, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I assure you, it's the truth. And so, as they walked through the sun-dappled forest, Lyra told her story. She spoke of her homeworld, of the conflict that had driven her to Earth, of her crash landing, and her days surviving with Stella. The humans listened in stunned silence, their expressions a mix of disbelief and wonder. That's incredible, Tom breathed when she finished. If it's true, it changes everything we know about the universe. But how can we be sure? Jack asked, skepticism clear in his voice. I mean, no offense, Lyra, but it's a pretty wild story. Lyra nodded, understanding their doubts. I can show you my ship, she offered. What's left of it, at least, and I have some technology that might convince you. The decision was made to detour to the crash site. As they approached, Lyra felt a mix of emotions, relief at finally sharing her truth, anxiety about their reaction, and a strange sadness at the thought of leaving Earth and Stella behind. The twisted wreckage of her ship came into view, and the humans gasped collectively. My God, Elena whispered, it's real. You're really an alien, Lyra finished for her. Yes, and I need your help. What followed was a flurry of activity. The scientists examined the ship with barely contained excitement, peppering Lyra with questions about her technology, her world, and the broader galaxy. This is amazing, Tom said, studying Lyra's portable scanner. The implications for physics alone. We have to tell someone, Jack insisted. The government, other scientists. This is too big to keep to ourselves. Lyra felt a flash of fear. Please, she said urgently. I understand your excitement, but my presence here must remain a secret for now. There are those who would misuse this knowledge, who might put your world in danger. The humans exchanged glances, the weight of the situation settling on them. She's right, Elena said finally. We need to think this through carefully. Lyra trusted us with this information. We owe her the same trust and protection. As the day wore on, plans were made. The scientists agreed to help Lyra repair her communication systems, using their own equipment and knowledge to bridge the technological gap. In return, Lyra offered to share what knowledge she could, within the bounds of her people's non-interference protocols. That night, as they camped near the crash site, the mood was one of cautious optimism. Humans and alien alike sat around the fire, the barriers between them dissolving in the face of shared curiosity and purpose. "You know," Jack said, watching Stella curl up contentedly next to Lyra, "I think your dog friend here knew exactly what he was doing when he brought you to us." Lyra smiled, scratching Stella behind the ears. "I believe you're right. He's proven to be wiser than I could have imagined." As the others drifted off to sleep, Lyra remained awake, gazing up at the stars. Her home was out there somewhere, still in turmoil. But here on Earth, she had found unexpected allies, a loyal companion, and a glimmer of hope. "Thank you," she whispered to Stella, to the sleeping humans, to this beautiful, complex world that had taken her in. The journey ahead would be challenging, fraught with dangers both earthly and cosmic. But as Lyra drifted off to sleep, Stella a warm presence at her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The alliance between princess and dog had grown, embracing these curious, courageous humans. Together, they would navigate the perils ahead, bridging the gap between worlds and forging a path to the stars. Hidden threat. As dawn broke over the forest, the air thrummed with an unfamiliar energy. Lyra woke with a start, her Astari senses tingling with alarm. Stella was already on his feet, hackles raised and a low growl rumbling in his throat. "What is it, boy?" Lyra whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for her energy weapon. The human scientist stirred, roused by the tension. "Lyra, what's wrong?" Elena asked, her voice thick with sleep. Before Lyra could respond, a deafening roar filled the air. The group rushed out of their tents to see a massive spacecraft descending through the clouds, its sleek black hull reflecting the early morning light. "No," Lyra breathed, her face pale. "They found me." "Who are they?" Tom demanded, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. "The Vox," Lyra explained quickly. "The faction that overthrew my family. They must have traced my ship's energy signature." As the Vox ship landed in a nearby clearing, crushing trees beneath its immense bulk, Lyra turned to her human allies. "You need to leave now. It's not safe for you here." Jack shook his head firmly. "No way. We're in this together now." Elena and Tom nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. Stella barked once, as if adding his vote to stay. Lyra felt a surge of emotion. "Thank you," she said softly, "but we need a plan. The Vox are technologically advanced and ruthless. They won't hesitate to destroy this entire forest, and anyone in it, to get to me." As they quickly gathered their equipment, Elena's scientific mind kicked into gear. "What are their weaknesses? There must be something we can use against them." Lyra thought fast. Their senses are highly attuned to energy signatures, but they struggle with organic matter. The dense forest might confuse them. "And what about your tech?" Tom asked. "Could we use it to create a diversion?" A plan began to form. Using components from Lyra's crashed ship and the scientists' equipment, they cobbled together a series of makeshift energy emitters. These would be scattered throughout the forest, creating false signals to confuse the Vox sensors. As they worked, the sound of Vox search parties crashing through the underbrush grew closer. Stella kept watch, his keen senses alerting them to any immediate danger. "Almost done," Tom muttered, connecting the last wire on one of the emitters. "But how do we activate them all at once?" Lyra held up her portable scanner. "I can use this to send a synchronized pulse, but I'll need to be in a central location, and it will make me easy to detect." "Then we'll need to split up," Jack decided. "Elena and I will plant the emitters. Tom, you and Stella keep Lyra safe until it's time to activate the signal." As they prepared to separate, Lyra felt a pang of fear, not for herself, but for these brave humans who were risking everything to help her. "Be careful," she urged. "The Vox are not to be underestimated." With a final nod, the group dispersed into the forest. Lyra, Tom, and Stella made their way to a small hill that offered a good vantage point. As they waited, the sounds of the Vox search grew ever closer. "Lyra," Tom whispered, "if this doesn't work, what will happen to Earth?" Lyra's expression was grim. The Vox would likely establish a beachhead here. Your world would become a battleground in a war you're not prepared for. Tom nodded solemnly. Then we better make sure this works. Suddenly, Stella's ears perked up. A moment later, they heard Elena's voice through the communicator. We're in position. All emitters planted. Lyra took a deep breath. Here goes everything, she murmured, activating her scanner. A pulse of energy rippled through the forest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, chaos erupted. Vox soldiers burst from the tree line, their weapons trained on multiple locations as the false energy signatures confused their sensors. Lyra watched in tense silence as the alien invaders scrambled to make sense of the conflicting data. It's working, Tom breathed. They don't know where to look. But their relief was short-lived. A Vox commander, distinguishable by his ornate armor, raised a hand to his helmet. A moment later, he pointed directly at Lyra's position. They've adapted. Lyra shouted, "Run." As they fled down the hill, energy blasts scorched the trees around them. Stella ran ahead, barking furiously to guide them through the dense undergrowth. Just when it seemed they might escape, they burst into a clearing and found themselves surrounded by Vox soldiers. "Surrender, princess," the commander growled, his translator rendering his words into harsh, guttural English. "Your little bane is over." Lyra stood tall, placing herself between the Vox and her human friends. "This world is under my protection," she declared. "Leave now or face the consequences." The commander laughed, a chilling sound. "You and what army, your highness?" As if in answer, a new sound filled the air, sirens, growing louder by the second. Lyra turned to see a fleet of human vehicles approaching. Police cars, fire trucks, and what looked like military transports. Elena and Jack emerged from the forest, grinning triumphantly. "We might have made a few calls while planting those emitters," Elena explained. The Vox soldiers shifted uneasily, suddenly outnumbered and facing an unknown threat. Their commander glared at Lyra. "This isn't over," he snarled, before barking an order to retreat. As the Vox ship lifted off, leaving a stunned group of human law enforcement in its wake, Lyra felt a mix of relief and trepidation. The immediate danger had passed, but a new challenge lay ahead. Explaining all of this to Earth's authorities. Stella pressed against her leg, offering silent support. Lyra smiled down at him, then looked at her human friends. "Thank you," she said softly. "I couldn't have done this without you." Tom grinned. "What are friends for? Besides, I think Earth just had its official first contact. Things are about to get very interesting." As sirens wailed and radios crackled with confused chatter, Lyra steeled herself for what was to come. The battle was won, but the true challenge of bridging two worlds was just beginning. Humanity's stand. In the days following the Vox incursion, Earth was a planet transformed. News of alien contact spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through governments, scientific communities, and the general public alike. Lyra found herself at the center of a diplomatic whirlwind, working tirelessly to explain her situation and the larger galactic context to Earth's leaders. Through it all, her unlikely family stood by her side. Elena, Tom, and Jack became her unofficial ambassadors, helping to bridge the gap between Astari and human culture. And Stella, ever loyal, remained a constant source of comfort and joy. "It's remarkable," Elena mused one evening as they took a rare moment of respite in a secure facility. "A week ago, our biggest concern was cataloging new plant species. Now we're helping to shape interstellar policy." Lyra smiled wryly. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns. I certainly never imagined I'd find such steadfast allies on a world I barely knew existed." As they talked, Lyra's communicator, newly repaired with a mix of Astari and human technology, chimed urgently. Her face grew serious as she read the message. "What is it?" Tom asked, sensing her tension. "A transmission from my loyalists," Lyra explained. "The Vox are mobilizing a larger fleet. They're not just coming for me now. They see Earth as a strategic location in the larger conflict. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth, still reeling from the revelation of alien life, was about to become a battleground. "We need to warn the authorities," Jack said, already reaching for his phone. But Lyra held up a hand. "Wait, I have a different idea." Over the next few hours, Lyra outlined her plan. It was audacious, potentially dangerous, but if it worked, it could not only save Earth, but possibly end the conflict on her homeworld. "You want to use Earth as bait?" Elena asked incredulously. Lyra nodded. "In a sense, yes. We know the Vox are coming. Instead of meeting them with just Earth's defenses, we lure them into a trap. My loyalists can position their fleet in hiding, using the same technology we employed in the forest to mask their presence. And when the Vox arrive, thinking they're facing a primitive world," Tom began. "They'll be caught between two forces," Lyra finished. "But for this to work, we need humanity's cooperation and their trust." What followed was a flurry of activity. High-level meetings were convened, plans drawn up and revised. To everyone's surprise, it was Stella who proved to be a key factor in winning over skeptical human leaders. The dog's unwavering loyalty to Lyra, despite her alien nature, seemed to resonate with people in a way mere words couldn't. As preparations were made, Lyra couldn't help but reflect on the strange journey that had brought her to this point. She had come to Earth as a refugee, and now stood as its defender. The day of the Vox arrival dawned clear and bright. Around the world, humans waited with bated breath, united in a way they had never been before. Lyra stood in a command center, surrounded by military leaders and her trusted friends. "Vox fleet entering the solar system," a technician announced, her voice tense. Lyra took a deep breath. "And our allies?" "In position and undetected, Your Highness," came the response from her loyalist commander. As the Vox ships approached Earth, humanity presented a united front. A message of peace was broadcast, even as defense systems stood ready. The Vox, predictably, responded with threats and demands for surrender. Just as the situation seemed poised to explode into violence, Lyra gave the signal. In a maneuver that would be studied for years to come, the hidden Astari fleet revealed itself, catching the Vox in a perfectly executed pincer movement. What followed was a battle that would go down in the histories of two worlds. Human ingenuity and determination combined with Astari technology and tactics, creating a force that the Vox were unprepared to face. In the end, it was over almost anticlimactically quickly. The Vox fleet, realizing they were outmatched, surrendered. Lyra's gambit had paid off beyond anyone's wildest expectations. In the joyous aftermath, as humans and Astari celebrated together, Lyra found a quiet moment with her closest friends. Stella sat at her feet, tail wagging contentedly. "So what happens now?" Jack asked. "I mean, you've got your throne back, right? Will you be leaving?" Lyra knelt down, scratching Stella behind the ears as she considered her response. "My people need me," she said slowly. "But so does Earth. We've opened a door that can never be closed. Humanity is now part of a larger galactic community." She stood, looking at each of her friends in turn. "I was thinking, perhaps Earth might benefit from an Astari ambassador, someone who understands both worlds." The humans' faces lit up with understanding and joy. Elena laughed. "I think that could be arranged, but only if Earth's first canine diplomat can come too," she added, nodding at Stella. As they laughed and began to excitedly discuss the future, Lyra felt a profound sense of peace. She had lost one home but gained another. More than that, she had forged a connection between worlds that would reshape the galaxy. Stella barked happily, as if sensing her thoughts. Lyra smiled, her heart full. The universe, she realized, was full of wonders, but none quite so wonderful as the bonds of friendship, loyalty, and love, no matter what planet they came from. As the sun set on this historic day, Lyra looked to the stars with new eyes. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities alike, But with her human friends by her side and Stella's unwavering support, she knew that together, they could face anything the cosmos might throw their way. The adventure, it seemed, was only just beginning.